So I wanted to take a couple minutes to respond to Jericho's very interesting and thought-provoking video on God of the Gaps. I don't know if people have seen Frankfurt's book on bullshit, but there is a lot of bullshit that goes on. I think Wikipedia helps perpetuate the bullshit, partly because people think they're well informed by getting a quick thumbnail glance at something. The problem is there is a large-scale, wholesale denial of human vulnerability that is being perpetuated on these communication media. It's very apparent. I, too, recently experienced Stickam, and I'm not really sure what to make about Stickam. I think that there is, well, I guess it would be a video on itself. The larger point in relation to what Jericho is talking about, which is the way that people use basically concepts that they don't understand to cover over the gaps that they do recognize in their knowledge. This is a very interesting concept. I think that that's so much that right-minded about it, but I think to try to get at that more in detail and to really address to what extent this is happening at all levels throughout more and more discourse, it's partly because people have become enfranchised to claim to know about things in multiple fields as the information explosion is happening through these new digital communication technologies. Specialization of knowledge used to insulate people in a way that the all-online environment is perhaps giving people quick and easy access to information, and they can recognize the words, and yeah, they can jump into quantum mechanics, and then they use that word, then they talk about Heisenberg and indeterminacy, and the next thing you know, it looks like someone knows what they're talking about. I think the same problem is that's all we ever have. I mean, that's all we ever have, right? When we read William James, the radical empiricism is a fascinating study of the way that relations are as real as the things, but the relations aren't there independent of people, and we fill them in with abstract concepts, abstract terms, very loosely fitting concepts, and their looseness of fit is half of their beauty. I think another way to say it is that language is metaphorical through and through, and that when people look like they're arguing, I don't think that they're using the terms and the concepts to advance the argument as if they're filling in the gaps, you know, for what they don't know. I think there are other people who are creatively playing in the interspaces between fields and disciplines, and they don't so much want to use the terms and the concepts as they're used in the field or in the discipline. They want to see if there isn't a metaphorical resonance and a capacity to see those kinds of concepts applying in one's own field. There are different kinds of multidisciplinarity. I think this really comes apparent as you start to look in the field of communication studies or in the fields of semiotics. Here people are very interested in the way that people talk about things. And any field of study, a scientific field, it has an object of study, an object of analysis, but it also has words and symbols for that analysis, for that system of making sense of things. And so someone conceivably could come in and rather trying to study the field, they try to study the relationship between that field's object of analysis and that field's symbol system, that field's presuppositions and the language that that field uses. I think communication studies, I think, obviously you know this very well, Jericho, on, you're there teaching English in a different country than yours, where the language is very different, and there it becomes apparent that that's what a language is. Language is a sort of filling in of gaps, but it's a making of gaps. I wonder how many of the gaps that we seem to be filling in aren't created by those very concepts that we didn't really understand to begin with. That is it that we have understanding, and then that understanding is clear, except for those moments that have gaps, which then we need to make recourse to these fill-in-the-gaps concepts? Or could it be that we always begin with concepts that we thought at first made sense, and then only later, as we get down to the details, do we realize that they weren't really making sense, but we never trace it back far enough to see that the original going awry was, yes, speaking. Yeah, somehow to talk at all is to, to imagine that you're going to grasp the infinite complexity that's all around you, simultaneously becoming itself with a little slow discursive, like we're silly little animals chattering noises, imagining that those noises could grasp the infinite complexity all around us. Now, I grant those noises may be self-similar to the mystery itself, and to that extent they have an aspect of the self-regulating cosmos, right? They're part of it. Still, that said, the question is, from where come the gaps? Are the gaps there first or after? Do we introduce the gaps by lack of knowledge, or is our knowledge itself always introducing the gaps? Is there a need for a recognition of the wisdom of silence in order to get to the kinds of truth that I think you want to help us understand?